After my baby was born premature, I messaged the group, "We are in the NICU, please pray." My mother ignored the message and asked my sister for vacation photos. My sister tagged me and replied with a vacation selfie from Cuba, while my dad sent a heart emoji on the picture and commented, "Now that's a real family." Aunt agreed, "Don't worry, if the baby doesn't make it, we will make sure to bring some flowers." Everyone laughed and nobody came. A month later, still in the hospital cafeteria, I opened my phone to 84 missed calls and my sister's message, "Answer. This is bad." I did. And then. I'm Rebecca, and this is the story of how my family showed their true colors when my daughter Grace was fighting for her life, and how karma came for them in the most unexpected way. It all started on a Tuesday morning in March when I woke up feeling strange. I was only 28 weeks pregnant, but something felt off. By noon, I was in excruciating pain, and my husband Andrew rushed me to the hospital. 3 hours later, our daughter Grace made her dramatic entrance into the world, weighing just 2 pounds and 1 ounce. The NICU became our second home overnight. Grace was so tiny, so fragile, connected to more machines than I could count. The doctors weren't sure she'd make it through the first week. Andrew and I took turns sleeping in uncomfortable chairs, surviving on hospital cafeteria coffee and whatever family members brought us when they visited. Except they didn't visit. I sent a message to our family group chat that first night. Grace arrived early at 28 weeks. She's in the NICU fighting hard. We're scared but hopeful. Please keep her in your prayers. The response was nothing. For hours. Finally, my mother, Diane, broke the silence, but not how I expected. "Jennifer, can you send me those photos from Cuba? I want to show the girls at book club." My sister Jennifer was on vacation with her husband and their 2 kids. She'd been posting constantly on social media about their amazing resort, the beautiful beaches, and their perfect family moments. Within minutes of Mom's request, Jennifer tagged me in a response. "At Rebecca, look at this perfect family vacation. Wish you were here instead of dealing with. Well, you know." The photo showed Jennifer, her husband Tom, and their kids Maya and Luke building sandcastles on a pristine beach. Everyone was tanned, smiling, and looked like they stepped out of a travel magazine. Then my dad, Frank, added insult to injury. He hearted the photo and commented, "Now that's a real family. Living life to the fullest." I stared at my phone in disbelief. My daughter was fighting for her life, and they were talking about vacation photos and real families. But it got worse. My Aunt Carol, Mom's sister, chimed in, "Don't worry, Rebecca, if the baby doesn't make it, we'll make sure to bring some flowers to the funeral. At least then we'll have a reason to get together." The laugh reacts started pouring in. Mom laughed. Dad laughed. Even my cousin David laughed. Not one person asked how Grace was doing. Not one person offered to visit. Not one person seemed to care that their granddaughter, niece, and cousin was clinging to life. Andrew found me crying in the NICU family room at 2 a.m., clutching my phone. "What happened?" he asked, immediately alert. I showed him the messages. His face went through a series of emotions: confusion, hurt, and finally, rage. "Are you kidding me?" he whispered, mindful of sleeping families nearby. "Your daughter is in the NICU, and they're making jokes about her funeral?" I couldn't even respond. I just sobbed. "Rebecca, listen to me," Andrew said, pulling me close. "We don't need them. Grace has us, and we're going to get through this together. If they can't see how precious she is, that's their loss." The weeks that followed were a blur of medical procedures, small victories, and devastating setbacks. Grace had to have surgery to repair a hole in her heart. She developed an infection that had us terrified for days. She struggled to breathe on her own, to eat, to do all the things that full-term babies do instinctively. I'll never forget the night Grace's oxygen levels dropped dangerously low. The alarm started going off at 3 a.m., and suddenly the NICU was flooded with doctors and nurses. Andrew and I were pushed aside as they worked to stabilize her. I watched through the glass partition, my hands pressed against the window, praying harder than I'd ever prayed in my life. "Please don't take her," I whispered. "She's fought so hard to get this far." Dr. Rodriguez, Grace's neonatologist, came to talk to us once Grace was stable. "She's a fighter," he said. "But the next few weeks are going to be critical. Babies born this early often face setbacks. It's not linear progress." That same night, while I was pumping breast milk in the tiny pumping room that had become my second office, I decided to check the family group chat. I told myself I was just looking to see if anyone had asked about Grace, maybe offered some words of support. Instead, I found a heated discussion about Jennifer's vacation photos. Apparently, some family friend had commented that Maya looked like she'd grown up so much, and this had sparked a 20-message thread about how fast kids grow and how important it is to make memories while they're young. That's why we never hesitate to take these trips, Jennifer had written. You never know what tomorrow brings. Life is short, and we want our kids to have amazing experiences. Dad had responded with a thumbs-up emoji and added, absolutely. No point in waiting around for the perfect time. You have to seize the day. Mom chimed in, I'm so proud of how you prioritize your family, Jennifer. Maya and Luke are so lucky to have parents who understand what really matters. I stared at my phone in the dimly lit pumping room, the mechanical whir of the breast pump the only sound. Here they were, talking about seizing the day and prioritizing family, while their granddaughter was literally fighting for her life just a few miles away. The irony was suffocating. I started typing a message several times, then deleted it. What was the point? They'd already shown me where their priorities lay. The next morning brought another crisis. Grace's feeding tube had become dislodged during the night, and she'd aspirated some fluid into her lungs. She needed to go back on the ventilator, undoing weeks of progress. It's common, Dr. Rodriguez assured us, but I could see the concern in his eyes. We'll get her back on track. Andrew held me as I cried in the hallway. I can't do this anymore, I sobbed. Every time we take a step forward, something else goes wrong. And my family? They don't even care. They're probably planning their next vacation while Grace is. Hey, Andrew said firmly, lifting my chin so I had to look at him. Grace is going to be fine. She's the strongest person I know, and she gets that from her mother. As for your family, forget them. We have each other, and we have people who actually care about us. He was right. Andrew's sister Lisa had organized a meal train through our church, and people we barely knew were bringing us home-cooked meals every day. My coworker Jessica had started a prayer chain that included over 100 people. Our neighbor Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman who barely spoke to us beyond pleasantries, had left a basket of homemade muffins on our doorstep with a note, for strength during difficult times. Meanwhile, my own mother couldn't be bothered to send a text asking how Grace was doing. The contrast became even more stark the following week. Grace had a particularly good day. She'd been off the ventilator for 48 hours and had actually managed to keep down a full feeding through her tube. It was a huge milestone for a baby born at just 28 weeks. The nurses were excited, Dr. Rodriguez was optimistic, and Andrew and I felt hope for the first time in weeks. I took a photo of Grace sleeping peacefully without any breathing support. She looked so tiny, but her color was good and her chest was rising and falling steadily on its own. I posted it to my personal social media with the caption, "Major milestone today. Grace has been breathing on her own for 48 hours and is tolerating full feedings." It might not sound like much, but for a 28-week preemie, it's huge. So proud of our little fighter. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Comments poured in from friends, co-workers, college roommates I hadn't heard from in years, even casual acquaintances. Everyone was celebrating with us, sharing their own preemie stories, offering encouragement and love. But from my family? Nothing. I knew they'd seen it. Jennifer had posted her own photos just hours later, pictures of Maya's school art project and Luke's Little League game. Several family members had commented and liked those posts. But Grace's milestone? Radio silence. That night, I made a decision that would later prove crucial. I started keeping a journal of Grace's progress, partly for the doctors, partly for my own sanity, but also, though I didn't fully realize it at the time, as evidence of what we were going through alone. Day 23 in NICU, I wrote. Grace weighed 2 pounds 8 ounces today, gained 7 ounces since birth. She's still on oxygen but much less than before. Andrew's parents drove up again today and brought real coffee from that place I like downtown. His mom Susan spent 2 hours just holding Grace while I took a real shower for the first time in days. Still no word from my family. Jennifer posted about Luke losing his first tooth. 17 likes and 12 comments. Grace finally opening her eyes and focusing on faces? Not worth mentioning, apparently. I kept writing these entries every few days, documenting not just Grace's medical progress but also the stark difference between the support we received from Andrew's family and friends versus my own family's continued indifference. Day 31, Grace had a setback yesterday, infection in her foresight. Back on antibiotics. Scary 24 hours but she's stabilizing. Lisa organized a blood drive at her work because Grace might need another transfusion. 23 people donated. Meanwhile, Dad shared a political meme about family values. I almost laughed, but I was too tired to find it funny. Day 38, best day yet. Grace is off oxygen support and weighing 2 pounds 14 ounces. She grabbed my finger today and held on for 5 minutes straight. Andrew cried. I cried. The nurse cried. Posted a video to social media and got 127 comments of love and support. Family group chat was busy today too, planning mom's birthday dinner. I wasn't invited. I'm not sure if they forgot or just assume I can't leave the hospital. Both possibilities hurt equally. The journal entries became my lifeline, a way to process the emotional whiplash of celebrating Grace's victories while grieving the loss of my family's support. Reading back through them now, I can see how they also became a record of my growing resolve. Day 45, Grace smiled today. An actual, real smile, not just gas like the nurses said before. She was looking right at me, and her whole face lit up. It was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I tried calling Mom to tell her, hung up before it rang. What's the point? She didn't care when Grace was dying. Why would she care that she's thriving? But perhaps the most revealing entry came on day 47. Jennifer called today. Not about Grace, she didn't even ask how Grace was. She wanted to know if I could help with Maya's school project about family trees. Apparently Maya needs photos and stories about her grandparents and aunts and uncles. Jennifer said she'd been trying to put it together but realized she doesn't have any recent photos of me or Andrew or Grace to include. She actually said, I guess we could just use an old photo of you from before. All this? I told her I couldn't help. She got irritated and said I was being difficult and that Maya shouldn't suffer because I was going through stuff. Going through stuff. That's what she called having a child in the NICU for nearly 7 weeks. After I hung up, I realized something. They don't see Grace as a real person yet. She's still just an abstract concept to them. A problem. An inconvenience. They're waiting for her to become normal before they'll acknowledge her existence. Well, Grace is normal. She's perfect exactly as she is, fighting and growing and becoming more herself every day. If they can't see that, it's their loss. Through it all, the family group chat continued its relentless cheerfulness. Birthday celebrations, work promotions, home improvement projects, vacation planning, life went on for everyone else as if Grace didn't exist. The final straw came during Grace's 8th week in the NICU. She developed a hernia that's common in premature babies, but the doctors wanted to wait until she was stronger before operating. However, the hernia had gotten worse and was affecting her breathing. I was terrified. Andrew was terrified. The doctors were being carefully optimistic, but I could see the worry in their eyes. Grace had been doing so well, and now we faced another major surgery. I broke my own rule and posted in the family group chat, Grace needs emergency hernia surgery tomorrow. The doctors say it's necessary but risky because she's still so small. Could really use some prayers and positive thoughts. I watched the little read indicators appear under my message. Mom had seen it. Dad had seen it. Jennifer had seen it. Carol had seen it. Then, nothing. For 6 hours, nothing. Finally, Mom responded, hope it goes well. That was it. 3 words. No follow-up questions, no offer to visit, no request for updates. Just 3 perfunctory words that felt more dismissive than supportive. But then, incredibly, the conversation continued as if I'd never posted anything. Carol, did anyone see that new restaurant that opened on Main Street? Thinking of trying it this weekend. Jennifer, oh yes. Tom and I drove by it yesterday. Looks fancy. Dad, fancy usually means expensive. I'll stick to my usual spots. I screenshot the entire conversation and sent it to Andrew with the message, I'm done. His response was immediate, good. You should have been done months ago. That night, I wrote what would be my final journal entry about my family's behavior. Day 56, I finally understand. They're not going to change. They're not suddenly going to care about Grace or recognize what we've been going through. This is who they are, people who can dismiss a baby's emergency surgery so they can discuss restaurant recommendations. I keep waiting for them to realize what they're missing, but maybe that's the point. Maybe they don't want to realize it. Maybe it's easier to pretend Grace isn't real, that what we're going through isn't serious, because acknowledging it would mean acknowledging how terrible they've been. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just done. Done hoping they'll be better. Done making excuses for them. Done pretending their absence doesn't hurt. Grace deserves better. Andrew deserves better. I deserve better. Tomorrow I'm leaving the group chat for good. Andrew's family, on the other hand, was incredible. His parents, Susan and James drove 8 hours to be with us the day Grace was born. They took shifts in the NICU, brought us real food, and set up a meal train for when we eventually came home. Andrew's sister Lisa started a GoFundMe that raised over $15,000 for Grace's medical expenses. His brother Mark organized a blood drive at his workplace because Grace had needed multiple transfusions. The contrast was stark and heartbreaking. After 3 weeks, Grace finally turned a corner. She was breathing on her own, gaining weight, and the doctors were cautiously optimistic. Andrew and I were exhausted but hopeful. That's when I made a decision that would prove to be the catalyst for everything that followed. I removed myself from the family group chat. I didn't announce it. I didn't send a dramatic goodbye message. I just quietly left and blocked everyone except Jennifer. I kept her unblocked for reasons I couldn't quite articulate at the time, but which would prove to be fortuitous later. A few people noticed and tried to add me back, but I ignored the notifications. Andrew fully supported my decision. "You don't owe them anything," he said. "Focus on Grace. Focus on us. The people who matter are already here." Grace spent 8 weeks in the NICU total. When we finally brought her home, she was still tiny at just over 4 pounds, but healthy and strong. We had a small celebration with Andrew's family and our close friends. My family wasn't invited, and honestly, I didn't miss them. Life slowly found a rhythm. Grace was a fighter, meeting every milestone the doctors set for her. Andrew and I were sleep-deprived but blissfully happy. We shared updates and photos with people who actually cared about our daughter. 4 months after Grace came home, I was settling into a new normal. Grace was thriving, I was back at work part-time as a graphic designer, and Andrew had gotten a promotion at his engineering firm. We were planning Grace's first Christmas and talking about maybe buying a bigger house. That's when everything changed. I was at Grace's pediatrician's office for her 6-month adjusted age checkup. These appointments had become routine by now, just making sure her development was on track after her premature birth. I was in the waiting room while Grace napped in her car seat when my phone started buzzing. One missed call from Jennifer. Then another. Then 3 more in quick succession. I ignored them. Jennifer and I hadn't spoken since I left the family chat. I assumed she was calling to guilt-trip me about missing some family event. But the calls kept coming. My phone was buzzing constantly. Other family members started calling too. Mom. Dad. Carol. Even cousins I hadn't heard from in years. Finally, a text from Jennifer, "Answer your phone. This is bad." Something in the urgency of her message made me reconsider. Against my better judgment, I answered the next call. "Rebecca?" Jennifer's voice was panicked, higher pitched than usual. "Thank God you answered." "What's wrong?" I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. "It's Dad. He's had a massive heart attack. He's in surgery right now, but Rebecca, it doesn't look good. The doctor said we should prepare for the worst." I felt the world tilt. Despite everything that had happened, despite all the hurt and anger, Frank was still my father. "Which hospital?" I heard myself ask. "St. Mary's downtown." "Rebecca, please come. Mom is falling apart, and I don't know what to do." I looked at Grace sleeping peacefully in her car seat, oblivious to the family drama swirling around her. Dr. Kumar had just finished her checkup, everything was perfect. "I'll be there in an hour," I said. "Thank you," Jennifer said, relief evident in her voice. "And Rebecca? I'm sorry. About everything. We should have been there for you and Grace." I hung up without responding. The drive to St. Mary's gave me time to think. I was angry, hurt, and conflicted. Part of me wanted to turn around and go home. Part of me knew I'd regret it forever if I didn't go. Andrew met me at the hospital. He'd left work early when I called him. "You don't have to do this," he reminded me as we walked through the parking garage, Grace's car seat between us. "Not after how they treated you." "I know. But I have to live with myself after this is over." The cardiac ICU at St. Mary's was eerily similar to the NICU where Grace had spent her first weeks of life. The same antiseptic smell, the same hushed tones, the same aura of barely controlled panic from families in crisis. I found them in the waiting room. Mom was crying into Carol's shoulder. Jennifer was pacing, talking rapidly on her phone to someone. Various other family members I hadn't seen in months were scattered around the room. When Jennifer saw me, she rushed over. "He's still in surgery," she said. "It's been 4 hours. They said it was a widowmaker, that's what they call it when the main artery is completely blocked." I nodded, adjusting Grace in her car seat. Several family members noticed me and Grace, but their reactions were strange. Instead of the cooing and fussing you'd expect when people see a baby for the first time, there was an awkward silence. Mom finally looked up from Carol's shoulder. Her eyes were red and puffy from crying, but when she saw Grace, her expression was unreadable. "She's so small," Mom said quietly. "She's actually doing amazing," I replied. "She's gained over 2 pounds since we brought her home. She's meeting all her milestones." "That's good," Mom said, but she didn't ask to hold Grace or really even look at her closely. The awkwardness was suffocating. Here we were, in a crisis situation, and they still couldn't bring themselves to show genuine interest in their granddaughter. The surgeon finally appeared around 7 p.m. Dad had survived the surgery, but barely. He'd need weeks of recovery and would require significant lifestyle changes. The next 48 hours would be critical. "Can we see him?" Mom asked. "2 at a time, for just a few minutes," the surgeon said. Mom and Carol went first. Then Jennifer and Tom. When it was my turn, I hesitated. "Go," Andrew said, gently lifting Grace's car seat. "You came this far." Dad looked terrible. He was pale, connected to multiple machines, and seemed so much older than his 62 years. But he was conscious. "Rebecca," he whispered when he saw me. "You came." "Of course I came, Dad." His eyes moved to Grace in my arms, who I'd taken from her car seat. "Is that her? Is that my granddaughter?" I moved closer so he could see her better. Grace was awake, looking around with her big blue eyes. "Her name is Grace," I said. "She's 6 months old now, but only 3 months adjusted age." Dad's eyes filled with tears. "She's beautiful. She's absolutely beautiful. Rebecca, I'm so sorry. We should have been there. I don't know what we were thinking. Dad, just focus on getting better right now." "No, I need to say this. When Jennifer showed us those vacation photos, and we all started making those horrible comments, I don't know what came over us. It was like we were different people. Mean people. And the worst part is, we laughed. We actually laughed about our own granddaughter." I felt my own tears starting. "Dad." "I was so jealous," he continued, his voice barely audible. "Jennifer's kids are older, easier. They don't need anything from us except birthday gifts and Christmas presents. But Grace, she needed us, really needed us, and instead of stepping up, we acted like children. Like spoiled, selfish children." Grace chose that moment to make one of her adorable baby sounds, like she was trying to talk. Dad's face lit up despite his pain. Can I touch her hand?" I moved Grace closer, and Dad gently touched her tiny fingers with one finger. Grace immediately grabbed onto it, her little fist wrapping around Dad's much larger finger. "Oh my God," Dad whispered. "She's perfect, Rebecca. She's absolutely perfect." We stayed for a few more minutes before the nurses shooed us out. As we walked back to the waiting room, I felt emotionally drained but somehow lighter. Over the next few days, as Dad slowly recovered, something shifted in the family dynamic. It was as if his near-death experience had snapped everyone out of whatever spell they'd been under. Mom asked to hold Grace and spent an hour just staring at her, tears streaming down her face. "I missed so much," she kept saying. "I missed so much of her life already." Jennifer was even more emotional. "I keep thinking about those comments we made," she told me privately. "About bringing flowers to her funeral. Rebecca, what kind of monsters were we? What if something had happened to her? I would have had to live with those words forever." Carol, typically the most outspoken family member, was uncharacteristically quiet around Grace. Finally, she pulled me aside. "I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest," she said. "Do you think Grace knows? Do you think babies can sense when people don't want them?" "I don't know," I answered honestly. "But she's surrounded by love now. That's what matters." "I was terrible," Carol said, starting to cry. "I made jokes about a baby dying. My own great niece. I don't know how to live with that." The conversations were difficult but necessary. For the first time in months, I felt like I was talking to my actual family instead of strangers wearing their faces. But the real revelation came a week later, when Dad was moved out of the ICU and into a regular recovery room. "I need to tell you all something," he said when the whole family was gathered around his bed. "Something I should have told you months ago." We all looked at him expectantly. "When Rebecca sent that message about Grace being in the NICU, I was scared," he began. "Not scared for Grace, though I should have been. Scared for myself. Scared that I wouldn't know what to do or say. Scared that I wouldn't be a good enough grandfather to a baby who might have challenges. He paused, collecting himself. So instead of facing that fear, I ignored it. I focused on Jennifer's family because they were easy. They were uncomplicated. Maya gets good grades, Luke plays sports, they go on nice vacations. I could be a fun grandpa without having to deal with anything difficult. Jennifer started to protest, but Dad held up his hand. Let me finish. When Grace was born so early, so small, I thought about my own father. He died when I was 12, and I always remembered him as this strong, capable man who could fix anything. I was afraid that if I went to the NICU and saw this tiny, fragile baby, I wouldn't know how to be that kind of grandfather. So I convinced myself it was better to stay away. But Dad, I said, Grace didn't need you to fix anything. She just needed you to love her. I know that now, he said. And the thing is, lying here for the past week, I realized something. I'm like my father. Not because I'm strong or can fix things, but because I love my family fiercely. The difference is, he never had the chance to meet his granddaughter. I did, and I almost threw it away. The room was silent except for the beeping of Dad's heart monitor. I want to make this right, he continued. All of us. We lost 4 months of Grace's life because we were selfish and scared. I don't want to lose another day. What followed was the most sincere series of apologies I've ever received. Each family member took responsibility for their actions and words. Mom admitted she'd been influenced by the others and hadn't wanted to be the only one to make a big deal about Grace's situation. Carol acknowledged that her jokes were her way of dealing with uncomfortable emotions, but that didn't excuse the cruelty. Even my cousins reached out to apologize for their laugh reacts and their silence. But the most meaningful apology came from Jennifer. Rebecca, I need you to know something. When I posted those vacation photos and made those comments, I was dealing with my own stuff. Tom and I had been fighting the whole trip. The kids were being difficult. Maya had gotten in trouble at school right before we left, and Luke had been having behavioral issues. Our perfect family vacation was actually a disaster. She paused, wiping her eyes. I was jealous of you. Jealous that even though Grace was in the NICU, even though you were going through hell, Andrew never left your side. He was completely devoted to you and Grace. Tom spent our entire vacation checking work emails and complaining about the expense. When I posted those photos, I was trying to convince everyone else, and myself, that my life was perfect. Making fun of your situation made me feel better about my own problems, and that's unforgivable. Jennifer. I started. No, let me say this. You and Andrew have something real. You're a team. When your daughter needed you, you stepped up together. When my kids need me, Tom acts like it's my job alone. I was bitter, and I took it out on you and Grace when you were at your most vulnerable. It was a lot to process, but it felt genuine. For the first time in months, I felt like I could maybe, eventually, forgive them. The road back wasn't instant or easy. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. But slowly, over the following weeks and months, my family began to prove their commitment to making things right. The first real test came just 2 weeks after Dad's heart attack. Grace had a routine pediatric appointment, and I mentioned it in passing during one of our daily hospital visits. To my surprise, Mom asked if she could come along. I know I don't deserve it, she said quietly, but I'd like to learn about Grace's care. I want to understand what you've been going through. Dr. Kumar was patient and thorough, explaining Grace's premature birth, her NICU journey, and her current developmental progress. Mom listened intently, asking thoughtful questions about Grace's adjusted age, her feeding schedule, and the physical therapy exercises we did at home. I had no idea, Mom kept saying. I just had no idea how complex this all was. After the appointment, as we walked to our cars, Mom broke down crying in the parking lot. Rebecca, I was so scared, she confessed. When you said Grace was born so early, I was terrified she wouldn't survive, and I didn't know how to handle that fear. So I just ignored it. I convinced myself that if I didn't get attached, it wouldn't hurt as much if something happened. But Mom, I said, bouncing Grace gently as she fussed, by not getting attached, you missed everything. You missed watching her fight. You missed seeing her grow stronger every day. You missed being part of the miracle. I know, she whispered. I know, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. That conversation marked a turning point. Mom started coming over twice a week to help with Grace. She learned how to prepare her special formula and became an expert at reading Grace's cues. Dad, once he was cleared to drive again, never missed one of Grace's follow-up appointments. He'd sit in the waiting room, proudly showing other grandparents photos of Grace on his phone. Carol, guilt-ridden over her funeral comment, threw herself into spoiling Grace. She knitted tiny outfits, bought developmentally appropriate toys, and started a savings account for Grace's college education. "I'm making up for lost time," she'd say whenever anyone commented on her largesse. Jennifer's apology proved to be the most lasting because it led to changes in her own life. She and Tom started marriage counseling, and she began setting boundaries about his work habits. She also made a point of including Grace in Maya and Luke's lives, teaching them about their cousin's premature birth and why she needed extra care. But the most significant change was in how the family communicated. The group chat was reconstituted, but with new rules. No more dismissive comments about serious situations. No more ignoring when someone was in crisis. And most importantly, no more laughing at someone's pain. As Grace approached her first birthday, the contrast between her first months of life and her current situation was remarkable. Instead of facing medical appointments alone, Andrew and I now had to coordinate with multiple family members who wanted to come along. Instead of radio silence when we shared updates, we got floods of responses and questions. The birthday party was a celebration not just of Grace's survival and growth, but of our family's ability to recognize their mistakes and do better. Dad gave a speech that had everyone in tears. A year ago, Grace came into our lives the hard way. She fought for every breath, every ounce she gained, every milestone she reached. But while she was fighting for her life, her family, her mother and father, were fighting for her too. And the rest of us? We failed her. We failed Rebecca and Andrew. We failed ourselves. He paused, looking at Grace in her high chair, happily smashing cake into her hair. But Grace didn't give up on life, and eventually, we didn't give up on being the family she deserved. She taught us that love isn't just about the easy times, the perfect moments, the Instagram-worthy photos. Love is about showing up when things are hard, when you don't know what to say, when you're scared and uncomfortable. He raised his glass of sparkling cider. To Grace, who made us better people. And to Rebecca and Andrew, who never stopped being the parents she needed, even when they felt alone. As I looked around the room, at Dad holding Grace while she reached for his glasses, at Mom and Carol arguing over who got to feed her next, at Jennifer's kids teaching Grace to clap her hands, I felt a peace I hadn't experienced in over a year. The revenge I'd fantasized about during those lonely NICU nights, cutting them out forever, making them regret their cruelty, paled in comparison to this reality. They'd been forced to confront their own capacity for callousness and had chosen to be better. Grace had gotten her family back, and in a way, so had I. But perhaps the sweetest moment came 6 months later, when Grace took her first steps. She was a little behind schedule, which her doctors had warned us might happen, but she was determined. The whole family had gathered for Sunday dinner when Grace suddenly let go of the couch and took 3 wobbly steps toward Dad. The room erupted in cheers and tears. Dad scooped Grace up, spinning her around while she giggled with delight. "Did you see that?" he asked everyone, his voice choked with emotion. "Did you see our girl walk? Our girl. Not just mine and Andrew's, but truly the whole family's." Later that evening, as people were getting ready to leave, Jennifer pulled me aside. "I need to tell you something," she said. "When Grace was in the NICU, and we were all being so awful, I used to have nightmares. Nightmares about her dying and about the last things we'd said about her. Those jokes about funeral flowers. They haunted me." "Jennifer, that's in the past now." "No, let me finish. In my nightmares, we'd be at Grace's funeral, and you'd stand up and read all our messages out loud. All the cruel things we said, the laughing emojis, everything. And everyone at the funeral would know what terrible people we were. But the worst part was, in the dream, you were right to do it. We deserved that shame." She paused, watching Grace sleep in my arms. "But this is so much better than my nightmares, and it's so much better than my dreams too. In my best dreams, we just went back to normal, pretended nothing had happened. But this is real change. We're better people because of what we went through. Grace made us better people." As I put Grace to bed that night, I reflected on the journey we'd all taken. The revenge I'd gotten wasn't the dramatic, explosive kind you see in movies. It was quieter but more profound. My family had been forced to confront the worst versions of themselves and had chosen to become better. Grace, completely unaware of the drama that had surrounded her early months, was thriving in a family that had learned to truly love her. She had parents who would fight for her, grandparents who spoiled her, aunts and uncles who celebrated her every achievement, and cousins who protected her. Sometimes the best revenge isn't making people pay for their mistakes, it's giving them the chance to make amends and become the people they should have been all along. And sometimes, just sometimes, a tiny premature baby can save an entire family simply by existing, by fighting, and by reminding everyone around her what really matters. Grace is 3 years old now. She's healthy, happy, and has no memory of those scary early months. When she looks at her family photos, she sees nothing but love. And that, more than any dramatic confrontation or cutting words, is the sweetest revenge of all.